Good afternoon, everyone. Carosoft Technology would like to welcome you to our ServiceNow webinar. Before we get started, I would like to quickly go over just a few housekeeping items. The audio portion of this webinar can be heard through your computer speakers, or if you prefer, you can listen through your phone using the dial-in option displayed on your screen there on the left-hand side. Please note all your lines have been muted to reduce any kind of background noise during this presentation. And if you do have any questions, please use the Q&A pod on the left-hand side of your screen. We'll do our best to answer your questions at the end of the presentation, or make sure to follow up with you all offline. This webinar is being recorded and a copy will be emailed to you afterwards. Just to tell you a little bit about Carosoft, we are a trusted government IT solutions provider delivering software and support solutions to federal, state, and local government agencies as well as education and healthcare. Carosoft maintains dedicated teams to support sales and marketing for all of its vendors, including ServiceNow, Google, F5 Networks, and Adobe. Our contact information will also be displayed at the end of the presentation, so please feel free to reach out, give us a call, or send us an email. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to our speakers for today. We have Ben Prime and Jeff LaCourte with ServiceNow. Guys, the floor is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Brooke, and good morning to everybody. This is Jeff LaCourte with ServiceNow. I'm the Security and Risk Sales Specialist for all civilian and DoD healthcare accounts within ServiceNow. My background includes cybersecurity, software as a service, and data center enterprise applications. Ben?
Hey, everybody. Ben Prime. I am the Senior Advisory Solution Architect for ServiceNow, covering security and risk for the Fed, civilian, healthcare, and finance sectors. My background is over a decade and a half in federal contracting, cybersecurity, everywhere from cybersecurity operations, midnight shifts, to policy and governance for Nuclear Regulatory Commission, audits, certified ethical hacker, and on some of the largest vulnerability scanning teams that the federal government actually employs based on the size of the organization. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Jeff and we can get started.
Thanks, Ben. So today we're going to be discussing not only managing digital risk, but also the ability to measure digital risk associated with vulnerabilities. And as you can see from the gentleman on the screen right there, there is his Tenable report that comes out. And you know, it's hard enough to deal with the daily and weekly inundation of new published vulnerabilities and not having a clear and concise way to understand the actual importance against the business risk and the mission. So with that said, the best that most people can do at an enterprise level right now is do the patches and then audit during the next vulnerability scan. So you're going to get this massive report, try to ingest it in a manual way, and then from there, try to then feed it out to everyone on your team that is going to work in that patch organization. So it is a very manual, mundane process around around emails and spreadsheets, and that's what we want to try to get you guys away from.
Jeff, there's actually a question already. So it's, how hard is it to get started, installed, up and running?
Oh, okay. So, wow. So the integration is fairly simple. ServiceNow and Tenable, and we're using Tenable as our scanner of choice for this presentation because of the ACAS solutions, and most of the funding through CDM provided Tenable out to the federal civilian agencies. So we work together to ensure that the applications are available in the ServiceNow store and are following the out-of-box best practices for ease of use. Now, maturity with the solution will come over time, and I would like to add that there is no need to have a comprehensive CMDB. We can actually help enhance the CMDB from everything that the vulnerability scanners find and bring into the we bring into the CMDB through the ServiceNow platform. So this presentation, again, is going to be starting to cover the idea of shifting from the current state and moving into the future state which is a much more automated process, ease of use, good dashboards and reporting to show you have a clear understanding of where you are. So ServiceNow Vulnerability Response is the application that helps organizations respond faster and more efficiently to vulnerabilities, connect securities and IT teams, and provide real-time visibility. It connects the workflow and automation capabilities of the ServiceNow platform. As you can see there, we have our scanner in there going in and automatically ingesting all of the information and putting that into a ticketing tool. So with the vulnerability scan data from the leading vendors, gives you the single team platform for response that can be shared between security and IT. Okay. Next, this allows you to understand the key risk indicators of vulnerabilities impacting the mission and the systems. While allowing full automation to patch management, patches can be pushed to test dev automatically. If they pass testing, then tools like SCCM or BigFix can be automatically orchestrated to push the patch to production. Or if they fail, there can be a process and an alert to manage to investigate the issue to understand why the patch failed going out. All the while working with the risk team and change teams to ensure that any POAMs or temporary mitigations are tracked from end to end, giving management the full visibility they need. So this is important. It's a single tool, single source of data. Everybody's sharing the same screens to understand exactly where everything is. So, and in the end, the vulnerability scanner, that was the authority on finding the vulnerability. So the confirmation and the true closure of the risk that can be confirmed with the vulnerability scanner, this can either be automated through a rescan or when the next scans are confirmed to close each vulnerability item. As you can see on the chart, we're going back and checking back again. So key takeaway on this, I guess, is the best way to say it is this is allowing you to understand that some lower vulnerabilities on critical assets may outweigh the most critical vulnerabilities on such as something like as simple as a kiosk and non-mission essential systems. So Ben, I'll turn it back to you to discuss GRC a little bit and how we integrate the risk piece into this.
Okay, so I mean, we fundamentally come down to the first question that we asked in the chat, like why do people brush their teeth? There was actually a root cause analysis, no pun intended. People who answered that they do it because they said so tend to fall in the obligation of the governance and things we have to go with. We mentioned CDM, we mentioned ACAS, we mentioned, I mean, there's FISMA, there's NIST. There's all of these different things that we're following the governance or regulations because they said so. The other side, the cavity people, those are ones for the secondary question, which was why does this stay awake at night? They're thinking of more of the outcomes of the risk. The governance is intended to get you there, but you still have to fall back on that risk, and those key risk indicators is why a lot of these things tie together. So, I mean, from the FISMA aspect, that's the original act, and if you actually printed out all the NIST documents as the authority, they'd be over 9 feet tall. And then you have to report on all of them, be it enterprise risk, mission risk, IT risk, and all the other business processes, continuity. We've done a heavy focus in the risk management framework, not only the accreditation in the production systems, but we're going to really focus on the continuous monitoring, that real visibility. CDM has been a foundation everywhere. It's the what's on the network, who's on the network. It doesn't go against either FISMA or RMF. It's a foundational logic and the means to actually have the tools to complete the task. Then we have things like the Binding Operational Directive 1902, which just shifted critical vulnerabilities in public-facing assets. That's essentially what we just said before, is what is the mission criticality? What is more important, the kiosks and the non-mission systems, or the ones that are public-facing and the actors can easily come at? So dropping that from 30 days to 15 on criticals and down to 30 days on moderates, that's a big directive. Now, not everybody may follow that, but the intent is still there again. How do we secure our federal systems? And then even if you get into CISA and U.S. Cert, a lot of this requirement to roll up if there's a breach in 1 hour, never mind having to do the full risk assessment and potentially go to the Hill or the House to report on why. I think that kind of happened with OPM. So those are the big ticket items for where we're trying to conquer that friction, is you have a lot of these different groups and a lot of these different silo teams that are looking at these things differently, from the security team and the U.S. Cert breach to overall Tier 1 governance from the top level of the organization. So those are the big ideas. Did we have a question? Yeah, so in the chat, there's a question. Our groups have a hard time getting answers and approvals through email and following up. We have seen the mobile app, but it's not available in the GCC today. And just for anybody's knowledge, GCC is our FedRAMP High government cloud solution. We've moved from moderate to high. Is there a possibility it will be available in the future? So to answer that question, yes, the plan is to move and have the mobile app released in Paris, which is just around the corner. We name our applications by cities right now, so Orlando, New York, Paris, alphabetically. There is a key there. That's putting it in a FedRAMP JAB approved SaaS. So there is the possibility that the JAB has their say and may or may not stretch our plans of when to release. But yes, the plan is to have the mobile app to do a lot of these approvals and authorizations to the process in the GCC. Okay, so where do we want to bring together? Just at a high level, even if we just separate out the continuous monitoring, ServiceNow is one platform with one system. So we're trying to eliminate that disparate data. Understanding risks from the finance department, understanding risks from the mission or the architecture and the different critical boundaries, if it's FOUO, classified, non-classified, and then all the way down to the IT systems, the ATO within that classified network or that compartmental network. Then once, and that falls back on the CDMs and the FSMA, what's on your network, who needs to interact with it, who has a risk stake in it, Chief Risk Officer, Information Security Officer, Chief Information Officer, everybody's kind of in there. They're looking at it through different lenses, so having that one pane of glass. And then reducing the risk exposure, because now you're bringing in the tools and the other data. You're understanding what the change team and operations are doing. You're understanding what the vulnerability scanning team or the security team is doing. You're understanding what HR is doing. There are risks with hiring and letting people go, accounts and things like that. So all of this is risk upon the organization. So having that context on one platform so you can operate the mission. And then we're improving that response speed, just like Jeff brought up, being able to automate all the way through the patching cycle, not just dumping the patch on because it comes out today. That's just too much risk. But actually responding to that speed and accuracy that if it passed the test of test dev, then we're through the change board, then we can just go automate it. You can actually really increase the speed and accuracy of your changes, of anything going on in your organization. All right, so from there, we're going to move into the current state, the pain points. And if anybody has any other questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. So the pain points. I came from Tenable. I know I kind of omitted that, but I was there. But I was on scanning teams. So that picture of the guy holding the vulnerability response stack of paper, yeah, that's a Nessus report, especially if you've been scanning organizations with over 1 million assets, 100 or so vulnerabilities per asset. That stack can get really big. So getting that data, a lot of times when you get that spreadsheet or you get that report, or it's actually given to the person to prioritize it in some way, they're removing critical artifacts from that. They're removing printers. I don't care. Printers are printers. But from my pen testing days, from the target breach, those things that you may not specifically care about are still commensurate with the system. So just for anybody's knowledge, the target breach was the HVAC system, was a third-party app. Nobody's thinking about patching the air conditioning unit. They're more worried about the credit card terminals. But essentially, the hackers hacked into the third-party managing the HVAC systems, and then were able to laterally move to the credit card systems. In another operation, when I was auditing a team, the only thing they let us actually attack was a printer. It happened to be the finance printer. I was printing off people's payroll. And then, one, it cost a lot of money to print checks, so I had accidentally overprinted checks in a financial debacle. But for the point of the CISO and the CIO, there was a risk there. They understood the importance of that printer at that point in time. So as this process may work for many, it's a lot of time with the teams to do this manually. That's why they're cutting out those things. And their time to focus on the administration, like how are they going to get it done, rather than the analytical tasks. Does that make sense? And I'm up to number 3. 1 and 2 agree. They're automated. 3 is where this administrative rather than analytical tasks come in. So we do have a new question in the chat for everybody. Now, from a ServiceNow understanding, when a patch cannot be implemented and the vulnerability has to be mitigated another way, yes, we do have that process to defer based on the criticality of the system. You may be looking up in a CMDB for your configuration items and your criticality across different systems. But we can do that deference. That's up to you. If you want to defer because the patch is waiting on the vendor for 2 weeks, you want to defer because that patch will actually break the availability of a system, or those types of things that calculate the risk score on your deferral and the risk acceptance. Which brings up a good point. There is also risk when implementing a patch into production, right? So when they prioritize the vulnerability, this big number 4 loop in here is all of the different teams, the different system owners or software owners in the different locations. They have to understand the risk of implementing a patch into production. That's why we test patches before deployment. When a critical vulnerability hits the news, which we, Eternal Blue and Heartbleed and all these other ones that made people jump, it's much easier to accept the risk and implement the change if we understand that all of the other process has been done. And from what I mean by that is prioritizing test and dev, getting the change approval on the major or minor changes if needed, deferring what can be deferred, and then prioritizing the changes and manually putting them in there. That's a big pain point for people. If you've done all of that and you're ready to implement the change and you're waiting for the change window, the risk you have to accept is somebody's not there to watch it. That might be a much easier risk to obtain and bring somebody in for a critical change than just willy-nilly pushing a patch to a critical system and taking down the availability when the criticality of that system was availability to begin with. And then finally, we could automate the process with change. Now, this is the process we used to do in ServiceNow. So from there.
So Ben, I'd like to ask for our next question to go up to the group on the webinar about their how their patching program is operationalized. So if we can have that one come up, that would be great. Thank you.
So how do we ship? So we talked about the different vulnerability scanners. We're agnostic to those. Doesn't matter if it's Tenable, TNS, or the old TEN, or Qualys IDs, or Rapid7, or directly from the NIST NVD. Bringing in that authoritative source of truth. Within vulnerability response, we're going to be able to prioritize those vulnerabilities like we talked about, the CMDB and the configuration items in the ServiceNow platform. You're designating what's critical business services, and those things can be brought up. We can also prioritize based on a third-party threat intel, like recorded future and other things, the vulnerability, the Tenable VPR score, right? That's how exploitable is it in the wild. Is it in my public-facing assets? Is it in my DMZ and public-facing? All of those can be used to set the priority, and then we can group them together. So now we've set the priority of certain vulnerabilities, but in the Microsoft world, they like to do one roll-up patch with supersedence for a bunch of different vulns. It might be a .NET vulnerability, and then you have another finding from the vulnerability scanners, that's for the operating system, and another CVE, that's a finding for Microsoft Office. But as far as the patch teams are concerned, their operation is, I have one patch to one set of systems, and that's going to mitigate a whole bunch. So rather than opening up that huge stack of 100,000 Tenable line items, we make one group with one patch to the patch team, and then we can still track the individual findings to figure out what hasn't been patched, what needs to be deferred per vulnerability, or we can defer the whole vulnerability group. Then we can talk about that automation that we talked about, where we can pass it off to the test dev team, and if it passes, automate the patch. That can make vulnerability response very, very rapid. Now, while all of this is going on, GRC monitoring all the different tables, we can have risk indicators. We can be monitoring those tables for all of the governance we talked about, the one-to-many. So CDM must scan all systems within 72 hours, if not within the next 72 hours. NIST 853 must have a RA5 and 7, must have a scan program that states how often you're going to scan. So we can be looking at the vulnerabilities coming in and the vulnerability groups to make sure that they're patched against those systems, and anything found will be a risk indicator. So that's continuous risk monitoring. Now, on top of that, when we actually do risk in GRC, it's usually the potential for, it can be flood, adversarial, it can volcanoes, tornadoes, unicorns, whatever that potential of a thing happening that impacts operations or the mission. When we do that, if we've left vulnerabilities open, that's like going on vacation, right? If you go on vacation and all your vulnerabilities are patched or all your doors are locked, then there is a lower risk. Your risk assumptions when you did your risk assessment are probably true. If you've gone on vacation and there's a whole bunch of doors that you forgot to lock and your risk assumption where they were locked, well, that risk isn't actually truthful, right? The risk assessment that you've done, you're actually more vulnerable than predicted, and there's probably a higher chance of those things happening. So from a risk to vulnerability perspective, we can actually calculate the scores over time and alert you that that 6 months or a year ago that you did the risk assessment currently is an actual state by doing that continuous monitoring, continuous reporting, and all on top of the ServiceNow platform. That's the biggest piece, is that any of those indicators can kick off workflows, any of those indicators can kick off automation, and we can even report on the process, we can report on the state, we can report on trending over time, and all of the teams are now linked together. It doesn't matter if it's finance, it doesn't matter if it's IT, it doesn't matter if it's change, it doesn't matter if it's HR. Everything's on one platform. So from there, I'm just going to look at the thing. Well, I missed that question, but it looked like 100% of the people who were saying scan team dumps reports on the patch team. That's kind of interesting because that's what we've seen in the Fed. So I thought it would be a little more different, but I think it was 100%. So when ServiceNow comes in to, we're going to try to eliminate that. That dumping and the patch team dumping and the prioritization, hopefully this concept will take away that 100%. Just dump on the patch team. I know it's an operational thing, but the CISO sleeping at night from the original question, why do you brush your teeth, both from a governance perspective is why the patch teams and the vulnerability teams are there. All of that should be tied together. The concept of just it's my mission to dump and scan does not get the mission of continuous monitoring, continuous risk, CDM's intent to protect the network, FISMA's RMF intent, OMB's shortening of the window for that. All of those intents were not foundationalized on it's just my job to scan and dump. So from there, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff, if there's any other questions.
Thanks, Ben. So next we're going to talk a little bit about managing the life cycle of the NIST-related policies for the updates, reviews, and approvals. You've got all your inventory, assets, vendors, roles, and responsibilities, and you can start to add some business context around those and what's critical and add that scoring methodology to that. So here we're looking at setting up integrations with those third-party tools, map upstream and downstream processes, align taxonomies, and match vendor tiers with their assessments. And then we're going to look at defining the scoping, profiles, policies, risk statements, and create controls and assessments, ingest customers' content, and then use the ServiceNow automation packs inside of the GRC application to help put those into the system and map them to where you need to go. Next slide, please, Ben. So for number 4, we're going to set up that continuous monitoring and automate the tests and assessments. So you're going to create your test plans, publish assessments, define the audit frequency, and even if you're doing VRM, you can do vendor risk management, and then you're going to be able to capture that risk, report on that risk, or compliance with your KRIs included as well. So here we got the real-time reports and dashboards, and this is kind of what ServiceNow is known for, is creating these dashboards that fit your agency's needs. They can be customized to show any type of report or metric that you want. And you're going to, so from our perspective, we want you to understand your risk posture, your risk compliance, and the levels of risk that you have. And at the same time, when we talk about risk and policy and compliance, we're going to be able to do self-auditing and build the reports that you want to have inside of your organization so that when you do have to go through that internal third-party audit, we're going to have a lot of the reports already created for you. So I can't tell you how many times we've talked to customers about doing those third-party audits and the amount of time and complexity they represent in the reports. So we bring a lot of that information to you out of the box with this continuous risk monitoring, and we turn that into another topic which we call continuous compliance monitoring. And the two obviously tie together. So back to where we started from, now we're at this mature continuous monitoring and predictive analytics. We're using AI to find things out, and this is a big deal. So you can do a complete risk assessment, view the performance of mitigating controls, and determine a risk response plan, right? This is where we really get a customer to be at this maturity level, so they're way ahead of the game, and they're not responding or reacting to issues or problems. They're seeing it come out ahead of time. Okay, and then I'll flip it back over to you for the vulnerability piece and integrating Tenable.
Yeah, So just 2 more slides before the quick top-level demo. We usually show the slide because we always ask that question about the patch team dumps, and I've been there. Patch teams in the IT operations, they know their patches come out on Tuesday, or they're monitoring for patches from Linux or wherever that is. And the vulnerability manager's really only job on that scan and dump is to verify what hasn't been patched. There is a push up to risk against the governance to verify if those risks are resolved or if they're automatically closed, right? But the shift needs to be, in my opinion, from what the intent of the governance is to protect the network, is that the risk manager or that risk mentality from the risk management office should be identifying the priority of the risks. They should be setting the scoring. It shouldn't just be CVSS, and it shouldn't just be threat intelligence. It should be on the business criticality that they spend all the time doing the ATO process on and authorizing that system and the risk acceptance and tracking their POAMs. They need to identify what's priority to them, not just track the outcome. Then they can push that to the vulnerability managers to help prioritize what the patch team needs to be looking for. I come from a cybersecurity background. I understand that a lot of times surface area is a much easier way to patch systems. Most of my systems are Windows desktops. That's the easiest patch. Microsoft's pretty good about getting out on Tuesdays, having the patch ready. It's a quick testing regime. But really when it comes down to a breach, like the OPM breach or something else, that's a few very specialized systems with very critical information, personal identifiable information, the HIPAA information. Those are the systems. When we talk to CISOs, for the most part, they're actually more concerned with those 5 to 10 systems than the contractor at saying they patched 10,000 systems this month or 100,000 systems this week or whatever that is. It's not surface area anymore. It's really coming down to, we just never had a way to do this, but how do I help as a risk manager enlighten the IT staff of what's a priority to me and break down those silos, those bars between. As a feature part of what's coming in Paris also, and to that predictive analysis, not only will we help prioritize risks and bring those things up as predictive analysis, but when the scan teams are trying to allocate to the owners and not really understanding how change is going to implement, based on other groups of vulnerabilities to the change team, how they've been altered. Either they've been split or they've been reassigned. Like you gave them to the manager and the manager delegated it to 3 different people. We're going to start with that predictive analysis that as new systems come in, understanding what software they're running or their vulnerability and the location and system owners or boundaries or whatever that is, we'll predictively give you an idea if it's unmatched to an owner of who the owner should probably be. Would it be a group? Would it be a user? Would it be a system? And then once it's in that group, then the change team can still correct it and we'll get smarter. It's predictive analysis. It's machine learning. But we can also help facilitate that speed of who owns this. Because with the scan and dump mentality, it's I don't know who actually owns it. And I don't own it as a scan team. This separates that mentality. Yes, you don't own it, but you getting the data to the right person for them to do their job is what enables them on their mission. So this helps with the predictive analysis big time. All right, so I'll jump into the...
And while you're jumping onto the demo pages, we're going to throw up one more question for the group to answer, please.
Yeah. So from a top level, we talked about a whole bunch of different pieces to look at, and a lot of times these are siloed. Your policy and compliance, your government regulations and your authority documents with your risk statements and your risk register and your control objectives tied to your policies are in one place. Then your configuration compliance or your vulnerability response is coming in from your scanning apps like Tenable and everything else. So we're actually able to take the configuration scans or the vulnerability scans or change management, or any of those, and we can map them to the granularity of the policies and the policy statements tied to the control objectives, and understand from a top level how the whole scope of failure is happening. I won't get into security incident response, but out of the box we do follow NIST 861 for contain, eradicate, recover, same thing US CERT follows. And then as you get better over time, like we said, we're still going to track that process. It doesn't have to be everybody on the platform, how much do they make, but we can put them in different buckets of patching or forensics for security or scanning, those types of things. As they get better and things get assigned and tickets get closed quicker, or they don't sit in the wrong queue, they don't go to tier 1 and sit there for 45 minutes or 6 hours until someone looks at it and goes, oh, this is supposed to go to someone else. As you mature your workloads across the ServiceNow platform, we'll be able to not only save you labor hours and value, but and reassign those people to do more diligent tasks, but we'll be able to report on that also, so you can show the benefit of that. From the second level, like vulnerabilities, new versus closed. A lot of these really aren't the biggest picture items. A lot of the vulnerability scanning tools will tell you configuration versus pass failed and time versus new versus closed, but we can do it on overdue because we're looking at each of the government pieces and what you put down for your policies against those systems or those services or those boundaries, your FISMA boundaries. And I'll dive into that a little bit more because I pulled out a little bit more, which is this. We have a lot of out-of-box, and all the other tabs are, sorry, I'm jumping around. The first tabs are out of the box. This tab I just added with an easy click of the button of add a widget and pull up my favorites and pull things in. But I brought these in because a lot of our vulnerability out-of-the-box ones, there's some overlap. I came from Tenable. I know, it's the point-in-time scanning, like how long has this been open for? Is this new, previously mitigated, all of those different things. What Tenable doesn't understand is what's on my network. It doesn't understand what the truth of my CMDB CIs are. So we're bringing in all the data from everywhere. We're closer to the authoritative source, if not the authoritative source of what's on my network, right? Master system, master user, master data. So when Tenable or a scanner finds something and it's unmatched, well, nothing's going to be done. This is why there's still open vulnerabilities for 60 days. And even beyond that, if the vulnerability maps to a system and the deletion of the system in the CMDB, well, maybe that piece of software doesn't have an owner, or maybe that OS doesn't have an owner. The person left, the person shifted, it's a legacy system and it's never been reassigned. Those aren't going to get patched. So these are the fundamental reasons of the vulnerability scanner finding things week after week, day after day, month after month, and then understanding where the patch team who's actually been assigned can get to things. Now, we talked about risks and other things. So a lot of times you wouldn't actually see that vulnerability trending on top of what you would be doing in governance, like your critical service boundaries and where those teams are with the changes they put in, any trending, or who's opened up the most POAMs for their business service. Maybe they don't understand risk as well and they just can't do it. They don't have enough staff. Maybe it is that they don't have enough staff. Maybe they need more people because they can't get through the testing. Maybe they need another testing system to actually run more tests to put different things in the production. And then understanding why people might have deferred that vulnerable item, the single vulnerability tied to a single asset, or why they would have deferred a group. So did they accept the risk and this went through a process through the information system security officer or the designated authority or whoever it went up to? Again, awaiting maintenance window, maybe that's one of those things we can shift. If you're just awaiting the maintenance window, maybe the risk won't be accepted for waiting. Maybe the risk will be accepted to change the window, right? False positives, I won't go into banter on that one, but different definitions. Fix unavailable, mitigation control in place. We have a lot of legacy systems, so maybe this is a continuing risk and everything rolls up to the firewalls or the boundary devices are going to take it. And any different way you want to pivot. And again, being able to see that at your fingertips for where that vulnerability group might be in state. So for vulnerabilities just coming in, I got 3 critical, I don't want to just send them to patch. If they've already gone under investigation and gone through the change board and done all their testing and they're awaiting implementation, maybe I want to do the change window on this one. Maybe I actually want to come out and do that. And being able to see those changes, training over time, dive into the application, or show all the records. Those things you can do inside the ServiceNow platform. Do a time check here. So from even the higher level, we'll have other dashboards just to give you that kind of view. Extreme risks with known exploits. You can pivot on any data you want to. You can make any of these tabs, any of these features, anything you want to do, export them, have them as a report by system class, by system boundary, by which team has the most exploits. All of those can be pivoted on. Unnecessary software, unauthorized risk. Another big key one, high-risk security configuration. So again, we're pivoting between the how is the box set up? Is the guest account disabled? Because you might not be completely vulnerable, but you might be able to mitigate through a configuration setting versus patching to the latest version of software, which is a vulnerability. And then the top known reports, the OWASP top 10, the DBR, the Verizon data breach, crypto, even into recorded future threat reports. So we do have an integration with them, but on top of that, even if you don't directly talk to recorded future, we're still taking their reports and we're still giving them to you in the newer format, so you can understand how much of your vulnerabilities are out there. You'd be surprised how many vulnerabilities for Heartbleed, Shodan still showing on their reports and their dashboards, things like that. We're not as bad in Fed on getting to those big ticket items, but it does give you that nice view out of box where you don't have to do as much configuration or changes. End-of-life software, that's another big one. Things are not going to be patched. A lot of vulnerability scanners just say, yeah, end of life. I'm not giving you a criticality, but the assumption is critical. That's kind of a big lift. That's kind of hard to keep in track. So one of our ties together is software asset management, which we're not talking about on this one, but they're keeping a running total of tens of thousands of different software vendors that are putting things end of life. So we can work with the platform and the other tools on the platform to understand where risk may be from a procurement standpoint even, like this is end of life. What do I have to procure? Do I have to pay more to upgrade to the next version? So that's the biggest top-level pieces. I'm a few minutes early. Does anybody have any questions?
And do we want to touch on tying back into the CDM requirements?
Yeah, we could. I'm not sure how many people would hit on CDM, but I can.
I think it would be a good topic.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff and I've been covering CDM for the last 7 years. I helped put Tenable on the original BPA before the approved products list. And apologize if nobody in here knows CDM, and I'm spitting out words. So some of the biggest items for us are we're across the boards. There's foundationally CDM is built on what's on the network, who's on the network. So you have tools collecting that data. From a baseline perspective, we talk to those tools. We talk to the Forescouts, the Big Fixes, the Tenables, the Taniums, the Splunks, and all that other data that's gathering in there. So we can actually, and our discovery on top of that, which goes out and finds things on the network, software on the network, we can be in that discovery layer. And as I look for my PowerPoint. From the next layer up, when we're talking about data aggregation, because that's where CDM really wants to bring everything together. And it's working out of those silos. Vulnerability is a data collection, but it needs to be tied to the master system, the master user, the master device records, which then fall in the FISMA boundary, the governance, which then tie into the OU container, which is the enterprise level. And then all of that data is rolling up into the dashboards, which there was a shift in the dashboards. So from that perspective, we are actually on almost everything from business continuity to operation manage and approve to design, build, secure, EVMT, event management for security. That's predominantly where our security operations tool falls. And we're in things like Group F, where we're already in the middle layer to roll up to the current dashboards, and we'll still be in that process when the dashboards switch over. And I'm looking for my PowerPoint, which might help explain this, but it's not coming up too quick. So those are the big ones. Nobody has any questions? I want to show of hands who's asleep. Somebody turn on their mic and snore. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to pull this up. Grabbing it, yeah.
Brooke, I think we're at the end of our presentation. I don't know if you want to take back over and drive any questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Survey.
I don't see any coming in through the Q&A pod, but just to remind everyone online on the left-hand side of your screen, if there's anything else you'd like us to show, we do have that available, and we can help you guys out there. If not, though, if there's any requests for individual demos or specific deep dives into other technology, we can help you offline as well. And Jeff or Ben, did you want to cover this slide really quick, or?
I think
No,
I did
Brooke,
most of the talking. Yeah, I think we're good.
Perfect, not a problem. I want to thank everyone for attending our webinar today. We appreciate you as well as our speakers. Thank you, Ben and Jeff, so much. We do have a few quick polling questions, so I'll jump into that as well. And our contact information is also displayed on this screen. Evan is with our ServiceNow team here at Carahsoft, and he can help address any questions you all might have, or as we mentioned, provide personalized demonstrations. Feel free to reach out, and I hope everyone has an awesome day. Thank you so much.